if you close your eyes and picture a dinosaur, I mean, just the archetypal textbook dinosaur, there are really only, what, 3 contenders. You got the T-Rex, the Triceratops, and then you have the one we were diving into today.
The one with the plates.
The one with the kite-shaped plates along its back and the spikes on the tail. The Stegosaurus. It is an absolute icon of the Jurassic.
It really is. It's one of those animals that's so visually distinct that even if you aren't a paleontology buff, you know exactly what it is.
The Mohawk dinosaur.
Exactly.
Right. But here's the thing that really struck me while I was going through the research for this deep dive.
Yeah.
For an animal that is so instantly recognizable to us now, we spent arguably the first 100 years of our relationship with it getting almost every single detail wrong.
That is a perfect way to frame it.
It feels like the history of the Stegosaurus is basically a history of paleontologists just scratching their heads and saying, wait, that can't be right.
It's a complete paradox. It's a pop culture celebrity, but scientifically, it has been a century-long puzzle. We've had to assemble it, dismantle it, and then reassemble it multiple times.
And it all starts with a name, right? You know what Stegosaurus actually translates to?
Roof lizard.
Roof lizard, which, when you look at a modern reconstruction with those vertical plates, makes 0 sense.
None at all. A roof is flat. It covers you.
And these are standing straight up.
Exactly. And that name is basically a fossil of a mistake. It goes back to 1877 and Othniel Charles Marsh.
O.C. Marsh.
When he found the first fossils in Colorado, nothing was articulated. The bones were a jumbled mess.
All right.
He found these large, flat, bony slabs, the plates, and he didn't have a reference point. So his best guess was that they lay flat against the animal's back.
Like shingles on a house.
Overlapping, just like shingles on a roof, yeah.
So the name roof lizard is literally a description of construction error. He thought he was looking at some kind of giant armored turtle thing.
He did. Marsh's early notes actually speculate that it might have been an aquatic animal, something like a turtle.
Wow.
It just shows you how difficult it is to reconstruct an animal when you're working with a jigsaw puzzle that's missing half the pieces, has no box cover, and the pieces are 150 million years old.
And we have to add the context of the Bone Wars here.
Oh, absolutely.
Marsh wasn't just working in a vacuum. He was working in a war zone.
Sure.
This was the late 19th century, and he was locked in this bitter rivalry with Edward Drinker Cope.
That context is crucial. The Bone Wars drove discovery, but they also drove haste. Marsh and Cope were racing to name species, trying to outpublish each other.
They were sabotaging each other's dig sites, right?
Oh, yeah. Sabotaging sites, bribing porters, shipping crates of bones back east before they were even fully prepped.
So in that kind of environment, you don't really take the time to ponder the details. You just name it, claim it, and move on.
Exactly. And that rush led to some wild theories. After the turtle phase, Marsh realized it was a dinosaur, but because the front legs were so much shorter than the back legs,
he thought it was bipedal, walked on 2 legs.
He briefly proposed it was bipedal. I mean, can you imagine a 5-ton Stegosaurus trying to walk like a person? The physics just don't work.
It would just faceplant.
It would be terrifying, but yeah, physically impossible.
Yeah.
And it took decades to correct these assumptions. Even when the first skeleton of Stegosaurus ungulatus was mounted in 1910.
Way after Marsh described it.
They set the plates in pairs, side by side.
Like butterfly wings.
Precisely. It wasn't until the 1960s, so nearly a century after the discovery, that the alternating row arrangement became the standard.
The staggered pattern we see today.
Right, that chiral pattern from Stegosaurus stenops, which is the species most of us know.
So now that we've cleared up the shingle confusion, let's look at the actual animal. Because the anatomy is incredibly weird, even when you get it right. It's a lowrider.
That is the best description for it. It's a quadruped, but the build is totally unique. The forelimbs are short and stocky, while the hind limbs are long and columnar.
And that forces the whole body into this permanent downward slope.
It does. It puts the head very close to the ground, about 1 meter high, and the tail way up in the air.
But what about the movement? I was reading about the stride length, and it seems like that mismatch in leg size put a hard speed limit on the animal.
It absolutely did. It's a biomechanical bottleneck. If you have long back legs and short front legs, you just can't gallop.
The back legs would overtake the front legs.
And the animal would, as you said, faceplant.
It's the classic flat tire effect.
Exactly. The estimated maximum speed is roughly, 15 to 17 kilometers per hour?
So about 9 to 11 miles per hour. A reasonably fit human could outrun a Stegosaurus.
Yeah. It wasn't built for speed. It was built for stability and for browsing on low vegetation.
A tank. basically,
Huh.
but a tank with a famously small driver.
Yeah.
We have to talk about the brain. It is the most legendary insult in paleontology, the walnut comparison.
The dumb dinosaur stereotype. It is legendary, and, well, unfortunately for the Stegosaurus, it is factually accurate.
How accurate.
For an animal weighing around 4.5 metric tons, that's bigger than an elephant, the brain weighed only about 80 grams.
Which is...
Roughly the size of a dog's brain.
yes.
A walnut.
But this is where the myth-making comes in again. Because the brain was so comically small, early scientists, Marsh again, he couldn't believe it could run the whole body.
Right.
So he proposed the sacral brain. I remember learning this in school. The idea that it had a second brain in its butt to control the tail.
That was a very popular theory for a very long time. Marsh found this huge canal in the hip vertebrae, the neural canal.
It was massive, wasn't it?
Almost 20 times larger than the brain case in the skull. So the logic was the head is empty, so the hips must be doing the thinking.
Or at least handling the reflexes.
But modern science has debunked that. It wasn't a brain.
Not nervous tissue.
No. We can look at modern birds, which are living dinosaurs, for the answer. They have a similar structure called a glycogen body.
Okay, what's that?
It's a specialized organ for storing energy glycogen, and it possibly helps with balance. So not a second brain. It was a battery pack.
A very well-stocked pantry for the nervous system.
That's a good way to put it.
So the Stegosaurus really was operating on just that 80-gram brain.
It was. But we need to be careful with our mammalian bias here. We tend to equate intelligence with evolutionary success.
Sure.
Stegosaurus didn't need to solve puzzles or hunt in packs. It needed to eat ferns, thermoregulate, and not get eaten by Allosaurus. And considering the genus lasted for millions of years...
That walnut brain was perfectly adequate for the job.
Absolutely.
Speaking of not getting eaten, let's move to the defining feature. The plates. The Great Plate debate.
Right.
We're talking about 17 to 22 of these structures. And anatomically, these are osteoderms, right? They aren't part of the skeleton proper.
That's a key distinction. If you look at a skeleton in a museum, the plates are wired onto the vertebrae, but in life they weren't attached to the bone. They were sort of floating in the skin.
Bone skin.
That's what osteoderm means. Crocodiles have them, armadillos have them.
But in those animals, osteoderms are clearly armor. They lay flat. They're a shield. And for a long time, that was the theory for Stegosaurus, too.
That they were armor plates to stop a bite.
Yeah, but that falls apart pretty quick when you look at the placement.
It really does. If you were designing a tank, you wouldn't put a row of billboards on the roof and leave the sides completely exposed.
Exactly. The flanks, the belly, the most vulnerable parts are wide open.
Plus, the internal structure of the plates is surprisingly porous. They aren't dense, solid bone like a turtle shell, and Allosaurus bites into one, it would probably shatter.
Okay, so if it's not armor, we move to theory number 2, which I find fascinating, the radiator theory.
The thermoregulation hypothesis. Because the bone is so porous, it suggests it was heavily vascularized, filled with blood vessels.
So the idea is the animal could turn its broadside to the morning sun to warm up, or face into the wind to cool down.
Pretty much.
It's like the ears of an African elephant.
Exactly like that. And this led to that vivid imagery of the blushing Stegosaurus.
The idea that they could pump blood into the plates to turn them bright red.
Yeah, to scare off predators or maybe signal to mates.
It's such a cool image. But my reading suggests this theory is kind of losing steam.
It is, primarily because of its cousins. If you look at related stegosaurs, like Kentrosaurus, they don't have these big, broad plates. They have spikes.
And spikes are terrible radiators.
Horrible. They don't have the surface area. So if thermoregulation was the main reason they evolved, why didn't all stegosaurs have flat plates?
It suggests the cooling effect might have been a secondary benefit, not the main purpose.
That's the thinking.
Which brings us to the explanation that usually wins out in biology when nothing else makes sense.
Sex.
Sex. Display and dominance.
It's almost always the answer when you see an extravagant, energy-expensive structure that doesn't seem to help with survival.
It's the peacock's tail argument.
Yeah.
You grow these massive things to say, look at me, I'm so healthy I can afford to grow these giant billboards on my back.
Precisely. And we have some fossil evidence for this. In Hesperornis, a very close relative, we see sexual dimorphism.
Meaning males and females look different.
Right. One morph has wide oval plates and the other has taller, pointier ones. That strongly suggests a male-female distinction.
And there's a detail about their appearance that I think changes how we visualize them. The fossils are just the bone core, right?
That's right. The bone is just the scaffold. In life, they would have been covered in a keratin sheath, same material as a bird's beak or your fingernails.
So the plates would have been way bigger than the fossils suggest.
Significantly larger and likely much sharper at the edges.
And keratin holds pigment really well. So we should be picturing these things with bright, vibrant colors, maybe patterns.
A 7-ton animal with a neon billboard on its back. It changes the whole vibe of the Jurassic.
Okay, so the plates are for show. But the tail.
The tail means business.
We have to talk about the thagomizer. And I love that we can use that word in a serious scientific context.
It is one of the rare times a cartoon changed science. Gary Larson, The Far Side.
He drew a caveman pointing to the spikes and saying, now this end is called the thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons.
And paleontologists thought it was so perfect that they adopted it.
It's just perfect.
Yeah.
But the weapon itself is terrifying. 4 spikes, 2 pairs, and unlike the vertical plates, these stuck out horizontally.
That orientation is critical. They are positioned for a lateral swipe, and the engineering of the tail is key.
How so?
Most dinosaurs have ossified tendons, bony rods running down the tail to keep it stiff for balance. Stegosaurus lacks those in the tail section.
Which means it wasn't a stiff rudder, it was a whip.
A highly flexible, muscular whip. And we have forensic evidence that they used it. This isn't just speculation.
You mean the Allosaurus vertebra?
That's the one, the top predator of the Morrison Formation. We found a tail vertebra with a puncture wound in it.
A hole that perfectly matches a stegosaur spike.
Perfectly. But here is the CSI part. The bone shows signs of healing and infection.
Which means the Allosaurus didn't die immediately. It survived the hit.
It survived, but it spent weeks or months in agony with a festering wound. That tells us 2 things.
Okay.
First, that Stegosaurus was actively fighting off apex predators, and second, that the weapon was incredibly effective.
But they did break them sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah. We find about 10% of Stegosaurus spikes show trauma damage, like broken tips. So they were using them in combat and using them often.
It completely reframes the animal. It's not a passive grazer. It's a samurai. It's got a display in its back and a sword in its, well, its tail.
A samurai that eats bushes.
Let's talk about that, the eating part. Because for a long time, the diet was another area where we underestimated this animal.
Totally. The head is tiny, the teeth are little pegs, it has a beak.
The assumption was it had an incredibly weak bite.
That was the consensus as recently as 2010. A study came out suggesting the bite force was less than half that of a Labrador retriever.
So it could only eat soft moss and ferns.
Pretty much. But then came Sophie.
Sophie changed everything.
This is a specimen found in Wyoming in 2003, and it is a marvel. 85% intact, 360 bones. The most well-preserved Stegosaurus ever found.
And Sophie proved the wimpy bite theory wrong.
Completely. When researchers modeled Sophie's skull in 2016, they found the bite force was actually comparable to a sheep or a cow.
Now, a cow might not sound terrifying, but they can grind through very tough, fibrous material.
Exactly. But Stegosaurus couldn't grind side to side. It likely used a shearing motion, like scissors, cropping and slicing.
So it wasn't just eating mush.
No, it was likely eating cycads, conifers, tougher woody plants. They were the mowers of the Jurassic, clearing out the underbrush.
Sophie really was a revolution. But we can't talk about modern Stegosaurus discoveries without talking about Apex.
Yeah.
This is the dinosaur in the room.
We have to discuss Apex. This specimen was discovered in 2022, and it's massive. But the headline wasn't just the size, it was the price tag.
In July 2024, it sold at Sotheby's for $44.6 million.
It's a staggering number, the most ever paid for a fossil. And this creates a huge tension in the scientific community.
It creates a crisis, frankly. When a fossil of that importance goes into a private collection, it effectively disappears from science.
Right. Even if the owner says researchers can visit, there's no guarantee of access forever.
Science relies on reproducibility. If I write a paper on Apex's growth wings, and 50 years from now another scientist wants to verify my work,
but Apex is locked in a vault or was sold to another anonymous buyer, the science becomes unverifiable.
it essentially privatizes the data. It takes a piece of natural history and turns it into an asset class.
And museums simply cannot compete. The Natural History Museum can't drop $45 million on one specimen. So we're seeing this trend where the best fossils are moving out of the public trust.
It's a complicated legacy for such a magnificent find. And it really highlights how active this field still is. Stegosaurus isn't a solved dinosaur.
Not at all. From the bone wars to the biomechanics of Sophie and now the ethics of the Apex auction, it's still generating debate.
And it has stayed in the public eye the whole time, from the 1933 King Kong to becoming the state fossil of Colorado.
I love that story. That was a fourth grade class, right?
It was. A teacher and her students campaigned for 2 years to get the bill passed.
It just shows you that this animal captures the imagination of children and adults in a way few others do. It's the combination of the weirdness and the coolness.
So if we pull all of this together, we've come a very long way from O.C. Marsh's shingleback turtle.
We have. We've moved from a clumsy, bipedal aquatic mistake to a sophisticated, well-adapted animal. We know it lived in herds, protecting its young.
We know it was a lowrider specialist, clearing the forest floor. And we know it had a deadly whip-like tail that could fend off the top predators of its time.
And we know that despite that tiny brain, it was an evolutionary success story.
It didn't need to do calculus. It just needed to survive.
Evolution doesn't optimize for IQ points. It optimizes for passing on genes. And the Stegosaurus design just worked.
So as we wrap up this redemption arc, what is the one thing that still sticks with you? What's the lingering mystery?
For me, it's still the plates. We have decent theories display, maybe some thermoregulation, but we don't know. Were they different colors in different seasons? Did they pump blood to flash warnings?
We're looking at rocks and trying to reconstruct behavior.
Exactly. It reminds us that even with an animal as famous as this, we are essentially looking at shadows on a wall. We are piecing together a life from fragments of bone.
And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the Morrison Formation, there's another Sophie waiting to be found that will finally tell us exactly why the roost lizard decided to wear a mohawk.
I certainly hope so.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep questioning what you think you know, and we'll catch you on the next one.